Welcome to episode 39 of Full Throttle, the Presidio Group's automotive industry podcast. I'm your host, Jason Stein, Director of Multimedia and Events at Presidio. And on a regular basis, Full Throttle serves as the industry's meeting point for great conversations with leaders across the automotive world.
If you don't have access to the capital, if you're an OEM and you're trying to navigate the challenges that are out there right now, and you're doing it with a small war chest, that's tough to do, because I think some of the bigger players are simply saying we're going to have offerings in both the ZEV space as well as the traditional ICE vehicles and the hybrid products in between, but a lot of the OEMs can't afford to play in all three, so they got to partner up in some way with another OEM, or just make their best guess as to where they think the future lies. But it's got to be very hard.
Paul Walser sits at the center of so much in this ever-changing retail industry. As he says, his team has a window into just about everything in the space. With 35 dealerships and representation of virtually every brand, his purview is a unique one into what's trending. And so much is trending. Pending decisions on tariffs and trade will affect some manufacturers and not others. Legislation around electric and zero-emissions vehicles will also have an impact. And then there's the constant chatter about Chinese competition. But what the former NADA chairman knows is this: the retail industry is firmly back to the future. It's 2019 all over again, and he can feel it in virtually every department in virtually all of his locations. That means a return to basics on many fronts. And as Presidio has said multiple times in its quarterly report, a great normalization of the industry. Walser supports that theory and that practice. In many ways, he's seen so much of it before. His history is rich in the twists and turns of the space. He's been CEO of the Walser Automotive Group for nearly 30 years, a second-generation leader who, along with his brother, grew the company from one St. Paul, Minnesota Oldsmobile store in 1954 to what it is today, a top 30 on the annual automotive list of top 100 dealers, and more than $2.5 billion in annual sales. Today, we talk about what he's seeing in the market and how the retail space needs to adapt to the changes that are taking us back to 2019. Here on Full Throttle.
Hi, I'm Paul Walser, and this is Presidio's podcast, Full Throttle.
It's great to be reconnected with my friend. Probably the last time was at an NADA. This NADA was a little bit more challenging, I think, for both of us. But nonetheless, here he is. Paul, hello, welcome. Thanks for being on the program.
Great to be here, Jason.
Tell me a little bit about where we are to effectively start the year. I mean, you and I have talked off air about how we know in all the instances that we've had together, there's never a dull moment in this industry. And that remains the same, isn't it, Paul?
It is. It's remarkable. I have never really thought to look back and keep track of the number of times where we were predicted to be dead. We meaning the industry, the franchise dealer system, and the like. It's oftentimes run into, as we've bought stores over the years, sometimes the seller is like, I think this is going to be, sort of the nail in the coffin kind of thing. And yet here we are 100 and some years later, and we've managed to battle through all these challenges substantially. I think I credit, NADA for really protecting the dealers and the franchise system. They're fabulous at it. And even though I'm no longer on the board, I'm super proud of the work they do. And we're still slugging it out. So it's fun. Every day's different. And I still love to sell cars.
You said it best, that this feels like we're back to kind of a 2019 scenario. And Presidio's written about that. The quarterly report highlights the stabilization, optimism, return to normalcy, if you will. Is that how you'd characterize it?
Yeah, 100%. I think that, there was sort of pre-COVID stuff that was, causing some high-level stress in the industry. And then the post-COVID year or so, there was still sort of the hangover from, what COVID did. And there was still, I think, an expectation on the part of dealers and OEMs that was going to continue. And I think most of us that have been around a long time probably understood that it was temporary and we were going to return to, you know, chasing market share and slugging it out and doing this stuff we've always done. So it feels very much like 2019 to me.
Market share, inventory, margins, all those things,
Yeah.
all three areas.
Yeah. And we're falling back into, kind of the way it was before where, COVID propped everybody up. So even some of the more challenged OEMs were doing well during those years because there was a shortage of product, so everything was selling. And so now we're back to, some of the OEMs are struggling a bit, and so it's a little bit more of a case of the haves and the have-nots right now.
You have such a unique position having virtually one of everything. I mean, you're about 30 rooftops. You're able to get a lay of the land on what's doing well, what is struggling. Any themes or common trends that you identify when you look at the landscape of all of the brands that you represent?
Oh, I don't know. I guess there. I try, Jason, to remain connected to the leadership for North America for most of the OEMs because I think to the extent that my brother and partner Andrew and I want to invest in additional stores, I want to understand the vision of where the various players are going, and so sometimes we see things that we are drawn to and we're like, okay, we got to go buy some more of these. And then sometimes we hear stuff that goes, ooh, that feels like a return to the 70s. Not sure I'm up for that journey. Uh, so I don't know. I mean, I guess that's probably the way it's always been. But I'm just a little bit more tuned into it now, having been through all those years at NADA, and I spent a lot of my time there in the industry relations area, which is communication with the other OEMs or all the OEMs, and so I'm perhaps a little more cautious now about where we go. So, not sure if that answered the question.
Yeah, is
Yeah.
it? Do you find in your relations and your past on industry relations, given that context, do you find it harder for OEMs to decide what path that they're going to pursue because of changing circumstances, whether it is regulation, whether it is consumer trends, outside factors?
Well, yeah, I think we're at a moment in time where there is, I think, a lot of uncertainty uh, uh, on the OEM side because they're wondering, where the government is going to be on this push to electric. Where are we going to be with respect to uh, the incentives associated with that? What are the tariffs going to do? They're worrying about all these things in addition to trying to remain competitive with their product offerings. So I don't envy these guys. This is a tough environment to be operating in. And I think the one thing that's clear to me is that if you don't have access to the capital, if you're an OEM and you're trying to navigate, the challenges that are out there right now, and you're doing it with a small war chest, that's tough to do because I think some of the bigger players are simply saying we're going to have offerings in both, the ZEV space as well as the traditional ICE vehicles and the hybrid products in between, and but a lot of the OEMs can't afford to play in all three, so they got to partner up in some way with another OEM or just make their best guess as to where they think the future lies. So, but it's got to be very hard.
Does the same apply to dealerships in general and networks that scale will be the differentiator here?
I don't see that yet. I mean, there certainly are some advantages to scale, and that the industry is consolidating, as you know. Not only there's some consolidation amongst OEMs, but the most of the consolidation is in the dealer space. Um, I don't. It used to be that of the 16,000 or so rooftops out there, that the vast majority of them were single point operators. Well, that's not the case anymore. It's completely the other way. So there's, not only the publics, but some very large privately held dealer groups that have been very aggressive buying stores in the last several years. And so it's different, but I don't. There are some advantages, but it's not as meaningful as you might think. We don't, because we're bigger doesn't mean we buy the cars any cheaper. And if we're located in different markets, we're not necessarily getting efficiencies from a branding perspective. If your stores are all in one area, there is some opportunity to gain efficiency that way. But if you got stores in Michigan, Ohio, California, Wisconsin, whatever, you're just, kind of clawing around like everybody else is. So, and some of these central consolidation efforts to, have one accounting department handling many, many rooftops, you can get some small gains there, but it's not as meaningful as you might think. So I don't see additional pressure to consolidate based on, some kind of cost savings or efficiencies.
You've gone through a process of, as you indicated earlier, expanding. Are you still in that Are you still of that mindset, Paul, for the right opportunities?
Yeah, I'm a believer that if you're not growing, you're kind of dying, and so that is it's more to me of being able to make a promise to team members that there's going to be opportunities for them to, live their dreams by ultimately, being in whatever role they aspire to be in. That promise is more important to me than trying to figure out how being bigger has, cost efficiencies like I was addressing earlier. So I think,
Right.
I think you gotta, if you're in business, you got to have an eye to growth in some manner or another, or you're going to be limited in terms of the number of really high quality, talented players you're going to get on your team, because they don't want to be somewhere where they can't advance. So I think and it's fun to grow. So.
Yeah. What are you seeing on the dealership value side? Lots of conversation over the last few years about where the bid ask spread, if you will. What are you seeing?
Well, the multiples that are applied to earnings to determine the value of dealerships haven't really moved that much. So you've got, some franchises transacting at 3 and 4 times earnings, and others are 7 or 8 or even 9 or 10. Those multiples have remained relatively constant. The thing that was different is that, when the profits went up materially during the COVID period, now you're multiplying those multiples on profits that are, in some cases, 3 and 4 times greater than they normally were. And so that equates to a very large number of in the way of blue sky. So if you got a franchise that trades at 5x and it was making $1 million per year in 2019, and all of a sudden it was making 4 million in the COVID years. Now that 5x, instead of being 5 million, is 20 million. So the price of poker went up considerably. We didn't do any buying of stores during the COVID time. I just didn't feel like that was something that was permanent, and you could rely on paying those multiples and get your get any kind of a return on your investment. So we were quiet during that, but we're actively looking again as things have normalized, and hopefully we'll be able to land a few deals here in the next year or two.
Do you feel that they have normalized, though?
Much more so, yeah. I mean, I don't think we're maybe not 100% back, but we're awfully close.
Right. What about the other issue that's continues to linger and kind of hang over the industry to some extent, which is something we've talked about on this program for a couple of years now, and that's affordability. Are you experiencing affordability issues in your market? And if so, how do you get around that?
I'm the wrong guy for that question, I think, Jason, because I'm not seeing it a whole lot.
Okay.
It makes sense to me that it would be an issue. We're fortunate, Minneapolis is still where the bulk of our stores are, and that it's one of the best credit markets in the country. Very, very stable Midwestern community. We don't have the peaks and valleys that are kind of more common in excuse me, the smile states and the like. And so I think that probably relates a bit to the question that you're asking too, is that, Minnesota people, um, they've got good credit. They, when they need a car, they buy a car. So I'm not hearing from our team members that we're losing lots of business because people can't afford these prices. It's amazing to me, honestly, because they have gone up a lot. Uh, but I do see right now that we've got some of the OEMs are trying to dial back and have more offerings in the kind of, let's call it, the more entry level target areas, whereas
Well, it's
for a while it was just nothing like that.
and it's difficult, right? Because if you're eliminating most of the sedans that are in your lineup or entry level vehicles, ones that you and I would have, historically said, well, that's a first time buyer, that's an entry point. If those don't exist with volume brands, then there aren't many other avenues, and it has brought up the issue of perhaps Chinese competition at some stage. What do you know about that? How much are you hearing about that? I know when you were on the board at NADA, I'm sure it came up a few times.
Well, many of our chairmen have visited China during my year, the COVID time. That was, I just didn't do any traveling. Neither did Rhett Reichert, the chairman before me. We were both kind of the COVID chair guys, and so there wasn't as much travel. So I wish I would have had an opportunity to go there and see it firsthand. But I know it's on a lot of people's mind. Apparently, they're building some good product, and it's, I think, pretty heavily saturated down in South America. I think as long as Trump remains president, we're not likely to see a whole lot of that coming our way because he's going to prevent that through tariffs and other tools in his tool belt. But so I don't think it's an immediate issue. But they're clearly the 10,000-pound gorilla.
Yeah, indeed. EVs, you mentioned it with a passing reference earlier. How do Minnesotans feel about EVs? And are your lots filling up with EVs until this inevitable pendulum swings of perhaps offering everything as an automaker?
Yeah, Minnesota is cold, and electric product offerings and cold temperatures are not good bedfellows. So there's we're not I don't think particularly strong state with respect to demand for those offerings. Our governor made the mistake of signing us up to the California Air Resources Board commitment a few years back. Thankfully, that didn't last because that would have been really, really hard in Minnesota to force these ZEV targets on a state that doesn't have the air quality issues that California does, and we sure as heck don't have the temperatures. So that was, in my mind, kind of a political play to get support from the environmental lobby. But Minnesota is not ready for electric cars at the levels that the government wants us to have. I mean, I think over time we can get there if that ultimately becomes the propulsion solution of choice, if you will. But it's a long journey, and I think the mistake that we often make as a country and the government is we want to try to get to the finish line too fast, and that just becomes impractical. These heavy incentives and targets and the like that even the EPA targets were high, the CARB targets are crazy, and so it's just too much too soon. We need to be pushing the hybrid technology, and we need to slow walk this thing in a way that makes sense for both consumers and OEMs and dealers alike.
Yeah, indeed. What are you excited about this year, from a business standpoint? Where as you look at the remainder of 25, I know there's a lot of uncertainty that we talked about at the show open, but what is it that really kind of gets this ever-changing industry? What is it that makes it exciting for you?
Well, one of the exciting things that's going on in my world right now is I now have 4 of my 5 kids involved in the business, and they are have reached a point where they're interested in kind of moving forward, with kind of their own ownership position, and this is the final year of the tax breaks, the inheritance tax breaks from Trump's first administration. And so we're doing a little estate planning this year, and we're going to get the kids a little more involved. And I've been having a lot of fun working. One of my sons in particular I've had the privilege of actually being his supervisor / mentor as he embarks on his first journey as a general manager. And that's been really fun. And now I understand more why dealers like having their kids in the game, because it's been really rewarding. He works very, very hard. He's doing a great job, and it's been extremely rewarding for me as well. So I'm looking forward to more of that. My 4th son, not in order, but in terms of getting into the business now, just joined this month, and so I've now got another one in it, and so I'm looking forward to working with my kids and launching their journey, and hoping that it's as rewarding for them as it has been for my brother and I. It's been just an incredible business that I love so much, and want very much for them to experience it. So I think honestly this year, Jason, I'm kind of that whole idea is sort of trumping, if you will, any other thoughts I have with respect to excitement about the industry.
Yeah, well said. And congratulations on your brother being nominated as a Time Dealer of the Year.
That was
as well.
Great. I think he should have won, but I'm perhaps a bit biased.
Yeah, indeed. It's so good catching up with you again, Paul. I appreciate you being on the program. Thanks for sharing your thoughts on a range of things. And you always have such an interesting perspective on where we are in the world. So thank you, Paul.
It's my pleasure, Jason, anytime.
Thank you. That's the 39th episode of Full Throttle. A special thanks to my guest, Paul Walser. Thanks for listening. And for a library of these episodes with industry leaders, go to thepresidiogroup.com. I'm your host, Jason Stein. We'll talk to you again next time.